Welcome back. This is the Signature Warning on Signature Television. We're switching gears right now with some other discussions also relating to the youth and development. We have with us in the studio Michael Okoro. He is the Deputy Director of DNA Learning Center in Nigeria. Good to have you. Good morning.
Good
Thank
morning.
you, Charles. Thank you, Belinda.
Do you think we have even developed as a youth population in the last decade? What are the problems that Nigerian youth face in the last 10 years?
Okay, thank you so much. So the first question is, what is development? Definitely. Okay, to say that you're developed, according to the global institutions, right? There are certain standards and metrics that you use. So that's why they classify nations according to levels of development. So now we have the highly developed, we have the developing nations, we have the developed nations, and then underdeveloped nations. One of the things that I've always said to people is that we deceive ourselves when we classify Nigeria as a developing nation. I think we are still underdeveloped. And that's because any nation that refuses to develop its youth population, certainly you're not looking towards the future, you're progressing. So it means that in the next couple of years, probably max 10 years, Nigeria is going to have a chaotic leadership. Why? Just imagine the kind of leaders we're going to have from now on. So in the next 10 years, we're certainly not going to have some of the leaders who are currently in power in around the political scene. So it just simply means that we're not thinking of the future because we are not taking care of the youth population when it comes to development. So development means that you are building for the future. You're thinking beyond the now, you're thinking about the future. So Nigeria is one of those nations that are not just poorly managed, but we don't have a development plan for the future. So you can't certainly say that we are developing in Nigeria. No, we are not. We're just playing around. When we're ready, we'll start development, yes. But for now, I don't see us doing the things that we need to do to think about the future, which means we are developing. Development means that you're moving forward. You're creating some kind of movement, some kind of understanding for other people to join you to build, right? So
Whose responsibility is it to develop the youth? Because again, so many persons think that, look, you don't have to wait for the government to throw at you palliatives or throw at you, certain initiatives, but you just have to try and do it yourself. But again, who do you think is responsible? Is it a combination of both, or the youth first of all have to take the initiative?
certainly a combination of both. So I'm just going to give this analogy. First, a tree, let's use a tree as a family unit. So the tree has to grow from being a seed to becoming a small shrub, and then becomes a tree, a young tree, and then get to the point where it starts budding flowers and then fruits. Now the tree represents the father, then the mom, the mother represents the flowering stage, and then the fruits, of course, the children. Now look at what happens when that fruit leaves the tree. That's the much the tree can give the fruit. Now, when the fruit drops probably somewhere else and begins to develop on its own, that fruit is only going to give what it has received from the tree over the last couple of years. Now, it's a combination of both because the older generation, they didn't plan as much as the generation before them to bring some kind of forward-thinking movement towards development. There has to be a progressive movement towards the future you think of. For instance, I will tell you that we don't have a plan as a nation. So there's no way you can go and read Nigerians' 100 years plan, 10 years plan, 50-year plan. Forget about the things that is thrown out, right? There's no coordinated policy thinking that helps us to build on the achievements of past leadership so that we can address the needs of the future. So it's a combination of both because the current generation we have, maybe not everyone, but we don't have the tools that we need to build. I can give you an example. The Erufais of today were properly trained because their fathers saw that they were going to hand over to them. But I can tell you that someday the former minister, the former governor Rufai made a statement and said that power isn't given, it is taken. But he said you wouldn't know that because you've not been trained properly, you've not been raised to do that. And that statement is factual because nobody is telling the young people that power is taken. They are being taught or being projected to think that somebody's going to just hand over power to you.
them.
No. When they are old, somebody's going to grab the power away from you that's because you're not being prepared. So I think that we just had leadership over the years that hasn't done proper handover. And that's because they haven't trained the next people after them. So that's why they keep recycling themselves in any way. And then it's not just about political power, in everything, just leadership, in business, in groups, right? Just have a few people who have successfully taken over their father's businesses and continued. What you hear is the business was bought, and of course, a couple of examples, I don't want to give names, but in the banking sector, right? A family took over a bank after the dad became older and ran the bank aground, right? And that's because I can tell you, he wasn't taught the way of his father. So that bank has been bought by a smaller bank, which shouldn't have happened. But that's what happens in Nigeria, where a smaller bank swallows a bigger bank because the younger generation wasn't trained or prepared to handle the size and the magnitude of the vision of the father. Yeah.
So who is it to train the younger generation? Is it from the family, or there's supposed to be a training specifically by the federal government or any organization for them to, get to the point where they can say, oh, I'm taking up the power?
Okay. So the good news is this. There are tiers of training that should go on. First of all, when a child is born into a family, something I will tell you that is just one of my opinion. The nation should have a say in how a child is raised. But I can tell you, in this nation now, we don't know how a child is born. We don't know what the parents go through to put the child in order. We don't even know what the child is taught from home. So the amount of hate that you see people exhibiting for the nation, it's not because they want to. Something was shown to them when they were young. So they grew up expecting certain stereotypes, expecting certain things to happen. So there is nothing new about what you are going to do in the secondary school, the primary schools, university, that hasn't been done at the home. But you see, there's no policy, there's no national cohesion policy that parents have been trained to do. In nations like Finland and Austria, when a couple goes to get married in the court or wherever, they are taken through a national marriage policy course about what do you expect to know about development of your nation. So your child is growing up and you see that his tendencies are tilting towards being a pilot. Where do you go to say, my child has lots of knowledge on aviation, right? China has that policy. So close to China and Russia, you just don't train your child alone. They help you to bring the best out of your child because it is a national asset. And that's because it's part of the policy for the development. A nation like China is doing what it's doing now because they are picking the right people from the onset, whether it's in gymnastics or athletics or in football. They are making very careful, consolidated plans towards helping to build from the family sector. But here we leave the family and then wait until the child is well formed and then start teaching him civic and governance or commerce in secondary school. And mostly at that time, he just wants to be a medical doctor because that's what has been told him. He doesn't know that he's supposed to be a good politician because he knows how to bring in policies. He has a good head on his shoulders and he can do great debates. He just doesn't know because he has not been exposed. And he's not exposed because there was no planning for him to be exposed. Yes.
So what are all the challenges, that are facing Nigerian youths in economic development in Nigeria for now?
Just literacy. We think that we are educated in Nigeria, right? But I say that anyone who is poorly educated is an illiterate because there's no need for you to be how do I say? Okay, so you get to hear that your pilot just did one course in the university, but he's a pilot. So he might understand some things about avionics, but he's poorly prepared for the job at hand, right? So it doesn't just mean that going through school means you're educated. No, it means that there should be a careful, thought out plan to help you to become what will contribute to the development of every nation. Something has to be done consciously. If it's not done consciously, then you can be anything. You could choose to be a rapper, even though you're probably one of the best vocalists that the Chinese orchestra will ever have or the world will ever listen to, right? But then you could choose to be a footballer, even though you're supposed to be an orthopedic surgeon. for the nation. You probably have great hands. You probably have steel hands when you want to do surgery. But some people, some groups of people have to have this carefully thought out plan to select the best of minds, take them through processes that can yield this result. Every nation that will develop makes this conscious plan and effort. But here we are not doing that. But then who do we blame? Nobody. And that's because we haven't been taught the way. That can I tell you, the people we have now in leadership, I don't call them leaders at all. I just call them opportunists. They are not ready for leadership because they too are not showing signs that they were trained to lead. So they are just doing that, and so that's why they make some kind of wrong statements that can damage the economy, and nobody takes a fall for it. That's because nationally they don't understand that if you ruin the developmental pattern of nations, you could set the whole nation 50 years back, which is something that's happened in the last couple of years. But you see, nobody has done anything about that. But you see, we have kept on replicating the same crop of leaders or crop of people who are in politics because nobody knows what to do. Nobody knows what to do, and I can tell you. So the people who are setting up, kudos to people who have governance schools here and there, policy schools here and there. But if they are not working with a central policy on how should we move Nigeria in the next 50 years, it's all a waste of time. Because you have 2 people against 4,000 people, all of you in governance. Sorry, you're not going to make a difference. And no matter how much you love the nation, no matter how much you want to try, you're not going to make a difference because you're just ill prepared and you are just a speck in the grand scheme of things in the dust of Dubai. So you're not.
Wow, interesting perspective. I'm just wondering, really, how do you think in this day and age of technology? I mean, we've seen people do big things, especially Nigerian youth. Go out of their way using technology to better their lives. And sometimes they even come out to tell you that governments they didn't receive any support from anywhere.
Definitely, yes.
You know, do you think that technology can be that gap, that bridging frontier that can be a tool for growth and development of the youth?
Of course. So the thing that I want you to understand is that somebody can be building a world-class technology and the government doesn't know anything about it. He also can be doing some damaging things behind his rooms and nobody knows about it. And that's because there is no plan to utilize what we have to get to where we are going to. That's because we don't have where we are going to, right? So if you say leveraging technology, we are only doing it at I call it the pocket development, right? Someone stays in Lagos and develops the ecosystem in Lagos, but move down just a few kilometers away from the tech hub, you see so much lack of what he's building. So he's building a tech app or a fintech app, but then let me just use Lekki and Ikorodu. Just 1 hour from him are 1 million people who need access to better banking opportunities, but they can't get it because he doesn't know that he should build for them because nobody is making him build for them. Nobody is trying to help him aggregate these things. Nobody is doing that. It's work for you to aggregate people's thoughts. It's work. But when we sit down to ask ourselves the real questions, how do we move forward? So you go to the tech sector, there's a lot happening because these guys are accessing foreign funding. They're able to communicate globally. If they were not able to do that, you will see the same problem we have in our politics or in our governance in the tech sector, right? But then how does the tech help us in governance? Right? It means that we need to ask ourselves, first of all, let's start from our elections. These guys who are able to build these great apps, are we able to use them to build our voting systems locally? And then find ways to build some kind of check mechanisms that will make sure, whether it's INEC or the police or the armed forces or the individual politicians, nobody has a way to break that system. And that's because it is not just going to be one person's system. It's going to be a national policy system. So everybody has a stake, both the people who are on the opposing side, people who are in governance, and that's because it is a national policy. It's not just going to be something somebody wants to do. So give them all the money you can. I will tell you, some of them are going to pack out and travel out when they're tired. Because one government comes in power and ruins the 10 years work of a young tech leader. What do you think he's going to do? He's going to take all the best of his mindset, his intellectual power, and move out to nations that will value his forward-thinking progress, right? So because we don't have, I just keep saying it, we don't have a plan. So if you want to be a good footballer, for instance, something happened with our footballing team, right? I can assure you that that case is dead. There's no plan to address that to never happen again because there's no national policy on sports development. None.
But it's not within their powers to have done anything about what happened in Libya. Is it not what you're
Good,
talking
great.
about?
So what is being done to make sure it doesn't happen again in the next 50 years? That is what great leaderships do. It is that there should be a policy, there should be a plan to ensure that for instance, I should think that our Super Eagles should have a private flight. I should think that as a nation that could afford to waste so much in creating a presidential fleet, we could as well get a fleet that can carry a 30 team group to a tournament as big as we are. Countries like Spain, Germany, Belgium, their players arrive in state customized aircraft because it's a national policy. It's not something a government can do or promise people. You know, sometimes something happens, a government comes in and says, we're going to do that, people are clapping. No. I think he should go back to the table. If there's a policy, fine. And if there's none, get 50 people of the best from the sectors and sit down and design a 50-year plan. And let me even say this. One of the things that saddens me is that I don't see our governors, even though it's not their fault, coming in and saying, we're going to spend the next 3 months not working. Gather everyone that matters in the state and say, you see, we don't have a plan in this state. So what happens is everybody who wants to be a political actor would be a signatory to the state development policy if there's no national policy and say, whether you're a governor or not, in year 50 or in year 30 or in year 20, we're going to be building a $30 billion developmental or economic zone. So it's not something one governor takes charge of and claims like we all do here. There's going to be something the governor says for year 1 to year 4. There's a Gantt chart for this leadership. So for 4 years, I need to raise 300 billion USD somehow. So it is his job and campaign promise that he's going to follow through with that to make it easier for the next governor or the next leader to continue with that trajectory. If they're going to achieve that, then somebody has to keep following a guideline. Just like what happened in Dubai, right? There is a policy for 100 years. Now they've just launched their AI ministry. And that's because in 2018, they said they were going to create that. So it was not the current mayor's job to create. It was the leadership trajectory that it was going to be created whether he likes it or not. And it's going to be funded whether he likes it or not, because that's a trajectory that the entire state or the nation has decided to go to.
So what are the policies, that you think can encourage youth to participate or can help youth development in Nigeria?
Okay, so let me go back to how we select our leaders and how we build leadership. Something happened in the last 2 years, right? And you could see that we don't have a national disciplinary policy. That somebody can turn the constitution upside down and we have all moved on away from it. Yes, comfortably. So you think that somebody who you call a youth is going to go out and vote again? No, he just knows that there's no opportunity for him to make impute. So he's not going to waste his time, truly. So if we want to start, let's start from how we create leaders, and that is from the family sector. How do we interact with families? How do we interact with the children at different institutions? So if we don't have the capacity to go to family levels, what about the school levels that governments have both the public sector schools, the private sector schools, and they're in charge of these sectors? So they can design curricula that is tailored towards raising leaders consciously. When I was in school, there was something we called be a leader in my younger days. But you see, going to university, those is vanished. Be a leader means you'll be just asked randomly, what do you do when somebody comes in and leaves the door open? Just randomly. And you are graded. You see, those things have vanished, including reading and comprehension. Right now, I can tell the average Nigerian has a comprehension problem. So he doesn't understand what the governor is saying because he thinks that what he needs is pipe-borne water. No, he just doesn't know that what he needs is a statewide policy on water. That means it becomes a crime for water not to be in your house. So the governor does not come in and promise water. He doesn't have power to give water. What he has power to do is to continue in the development of the policy. So there are all kinds of things we can do with policy, but it starts from deciding that we're going to raise leaders. And leadership is everybody following. And everybody following means everybody understands where we are going to, and every one of us can take us there. You are just opportune to be the one leading the ship or moving the boat. That's all. So there's no superstar. There is no savior anywhere. There is no miracle anywhere. It just means that people have decided to keep going forward, and probably you are just the one selected amongst the various eligible leaders that have been trained, tutored, prepared for this same role. That's what happens in great nations, that people just fill in positions and then things keep on going. For instance, in the American nation is going for elections. There's already an agency that oversees the handover process. So for instance, once the new president is allowed, the electoral college signs off on it, they give him a call, give her a call, and the next thing they do is to set them up an office. It's a national policy. So the current president or the incumbent cannot say you won't get an office, you won't get security, you won't get an official board. So they get a budget. And you see, somebody is not going to say, reduce the budget because it's my opponent. No. The budget is, and it's not the governor's job to write, but the president's job to write. It is the agency's job, carved out of a leadership policy. So there's always a smooth transition. And what happens if this guy or woman does not want to leave office? There's also a guideline for it.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Wow. Really insightful. Many thanks for your time. I mean,
Thank you so
we can
much.
talk about this issue over the next 3 hours, and it will not be something we would exhaust. But I'm sure that in due course we'll invite you again.
Thank you so
to
much.
have an extensive discussion,
Yes, we
especially
are.
as it concerns how to mitigate these challenges that the deregulation of the oil sector has caused,
Yes,
especially
of
for the
course.
Nigerian youth.
Of course.
I don't know if you want to just wrap up in just
Yes.
1 minute.
So the good news is just to talk about someone just doesn't stand up and say something, it becomes a policy. In this country, somebody makes a statement and employs 160,000 people. Just so you know. In our constitution, the president has powers to appoint up to 160,000 people and would not need to go through a proper channel. So in this case, we can have a judicial officer appointed to the highest office of the land, and we now have to go to the Senate just to do what? It's a mess. So he stands up on this first day of inauguration and says something, and the entire economy is in shambles because there are no guardrails. There's no policy. So people just know that his word is law. And so everything starts going south because somebody makes a careless statement. Now, the problem is this. If we don't have a conscious plan, it will get worse.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so
Thank you very much,
Mr. Okoro.
Thank you so
Dr.
much. I appreciate
Michael
it.
Okoro, the Deputy Director, DNA Learning Center, Nigeria. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, this is where we'll wrap it up on this particular episode. Do stay with us after this break.